Hi, welcome. On this video, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the issue about regarding control and motives as it relates to dogs. Now, this is one of the central issues that really needs to be understood, and there's a real lack of information out in the mainstream dog training world regarding the issue about motives and the reasons why dogs will respond, and this problem I keep talking about regarding the mainstream picture of change that the majority of trainers invest in. They promote that as something meaningful, and they'll reward a dog in a certain position or via a certain response. And oftentimes, you're rewarding that state of mind even while the dog's motives have not cleaned up. Okay, the dog's perceptions have not changed of the person. And so this is a critical issue for people to start to get a sense of, because again, when you employ certain methods to help you get to where you need to go, oftentimes it's merely a exercise in futility based on how it covers off. And this is why I talk about when you see me working the leash and approaching training for what it is, a relational changing process. It's really important to understand about why things need to go down a certain way through the methodology so that meaningful change can happen, is promoted in and through the person at the right level properly, so that change happens, so the motives clean up with the dog. So if you get caught up in this issue about incentivizing and trying to find something to motivate the dog to do certain things, and then you make assumptions on the response of the dog with how that picture sets up, even when dogs respond at times, understand it does not mean it whatsoever that the motives have aligned. In fact, the dog will continue to maintain or keep control even while they're going through certain responses. Because again, it's about how it covers off. So there's if you look at it, there's a lot of gaps that happen even if you're employing certain devices. This is why I talk about like remote collars, pinch collars, or certain devices that will bring a dog under a certain level of influence. Okay, and so you can have a physical position where the dog's going to stay into a certain position based on a certain device, but it does not mean that the perceptions of the dog have changed towards the person, towards the individual. The dog says, well, that person has not changed. I'm still in control. And that's something to really understand. So here are examples I'll use. Again, people, and this is the problem, is that people really will take it to a level where they'll say, well, the dog appears almost like bipolar. I've heard that word used. The dog, that people feel totally blindsided when something happens. The dog becomes aggressive in a certain situation, and they feel like they don't have enough information, like they don't have good clarity. Well, again, the reason that the human doesn't have good clarity is this issue of control. So really important to understand is the dog is gaining control. What happens is their mind, that they'll appear to be a balanced dog because they're being fulfilled that way. They're in control. So, you're not seeing within the parameters of certain interactions within the whole environment, you're not getting the information that you expect to get because the dog is in control. But you'll see, if you pay attention, the dog will respond to certain individuals, certain personality types. They'll disconnect away. They'll go into certain areas. They'll seek out that which they gain the most fulfillment and control in and through. Okay, keep that kind of in your back pocket, because then, as I start talking here and you start to really make sense of this, you'll start to see it differently. It'll give you the information that perhaps you felt you're lacking. You'll start to see things from the perspective of control. But again, so therefore the issue of clarity, of getting the right information, of feeling like making this connection between both and not feeling like, hey, my dog is totally, completely insane. Well, no, actually what's happening is, the moments that you're seeing, because you will get clues, okay? If you look at certain interactions, how the dog responds to influence within the again, within the framework of what's reasonable. So say through using the leash certain ways, in certain interactions with the dogs, in claiming certain objects, taking them out of certain situations, you'll see the challenge happen. You'll see the dog begin to challenge. This is why using the leash is one of the first things to start to go down the tube, so to speak, because even out in the outside world, because it's about control, it's about how the dog's mind will start to reach out and invest, and the elevation levels of the mind. You'll see that. This is why, when I'm tuning people into, the method, and what I'm doing is I'm getting them in tune to this issue of how the dog's mind is reaching out. Okay, this level of being objectified, that level of separation, and then when you talk about change, you're actually it's the method itself. How I employ it, it's very proactive. Okay, it's not reactive. I make the distinction between a correction and relational influence, how that covers off properly. But that's the point. It's very important. It's about the integrity of the method. You have to, when you're using my method, it's got to hold true. It's got to maintain consistency. Everything that I show people, you got to be doing it, because it's about how change is promoted, how it's defined, how it's promoted in and through the person, to change perceptions, to clean up the motives of the dog. Because again, everything's like stinking thinking. Everything becomes contaminated. But getting back to this whole picture of things, this is why the issue of control, it's very deceptive, because how the mind of the dog responds or settles into as he or she gains power. There's a certain comfort to that. Okay, they're not being challenged, and then the issue of control, how it's happening, is defined in and through that person. Just understand, this is the problem with, as a dog starts to gain control and start to make connections, certain associations through that person, then you have another problem, because through response, what happens is the dog will do certain things to get to something else more fulfilling. So you may have that dog, this is why I have that dog wait to do certain things, and then in your mind, right, you're saying, wow, that must be meaningful. The dog's waiting to get to its food or something else. Well, no, ultimately that dog's in control, but the dog still knows that it has to wait to get to something else it wants, so it'll do it because it feels it doesn't have an option, but it's not covering off properly. Do you understand? That dog is still, it's just be like a selfish child that will kind of play the game, but they feel they're totally in control of their environment and their circumstances, and they'll manipulate and do certain things to get to whatever else are more meaningful to them. But it's totally, it's based off of knowing the players involved and how to kind of pull the strings. But the dog is the same type of thing. It's not as intentional that way as the human, but it's very similar in a lot of ways. The dog will go through the motions and do certain things because they know that they have to, based on what you represent to them, relationally. But they're still holding, the motives are still rotten to the core, and because again, the perceptions haven't changed. You're just doing certain things, thinking through the responses that's significant, and in reality it's not. You have to get a three-dimensional view of everything to understand whether or not it's actually change is happening. But I pretty much guarantee you that this is why how I developed the method. It's meant to be, it's meant to create meaningful change. It holds together a certain way for certain reasons, and it's meant to stay true to what it is, so that it's all going to clean up. But again, so when you employ certain, you try to get certain responses from the dog, just understand it does not mean whatsoever that the motives are cleaning up. Okay, you have to, it's got to cover off properly. And so even in issues of getting into this issue about other situations and people too, this is why a bite situation could happen, and within certain interactions you'll say, wow, the bite wasn't bad, the dog released, but the dog released because it gained back control through you. Okay, it again, understand certain interactions about challenging that dog's control within a certain interaction. It doesn't mean that basically the dog's getting that to stop and then release and then gaining back control through that person. So there's certain interactions that can be very, very. You have to be able to really see how these control dynamics play out to really understand what's going on. But dogs, again, a dog can be holding a tremendous amount of power. The modes be completely rotten, and you'll be thinking certain things, and that's not that at all. So anyway, just something to think about when it comes to control and understanding the why the method has to cover off a certain way. Certain devices oftentimes won't do the trick because it's like gaps. Okay, it's just it comes down to the type of influence and how that plays out so that meaningful change happens. So it's really important that when you look at my method, I developed it for everything has meaning in it. It's meant to change the perceptions of the dog. So thanks for watching.